All right. Good day, listeners to CFO Club. My name is Nicolas van Wyk, and I'll be interviewing Rebecca Paul, currently the Vice President of Finance of Entity Data South Africa, previously Dimension Data. Rebecca has a very impressive history and development within the finance sector, and she's been covered in multiple articles and publications, and we're very happy today to have her join us here at CFO Club. CFO Club is something that started back in 2016. Um, Myself and a few colleagues started it. I was actually approached by overseas CFOs from the International CFO Alliance and other groupings, but why doesn't South Africa start the CFO Association, CFO group? We then, as part of SIBA, and the CFO Club is part of the Chartered Institute of Business Accountants, registered a designation for CFOs, and we felt that with this designation, we may also need a CFO Club to build a network of CFOs. And this has since grown tremendously. As with our international alliance, there's now 22 countries part of the CFO Alliance, the International CFO Alliance, and we have three work streams or work groups. One for CFO certification, talking about the skills of the modern CFO and how we can standardize these. That's a project that just started with the European Union. There's others related to ESG and the CFO role and how do we help shape these. So through the CFO Alliance, the CFO Club make comments on the ESG standards. And then there's others for automation and digitization, and the last is international tax. Um, and then today we also do a lot of blog posts within CFO Club. You can go to our LinkedIn page and view it there, and then interview well-known and influential and expert CFOs just on the things they're busy with to share it with our market. And as I said today, I'm speaking with Rebecca Paul. Her career is marked with significant achievements and leadership roles across various global organizations. Her journey started in finance, graduated from University of Warwick in mathematics, and then with some stints as in doing our articles. I hope I had that right. The University of Warwick. We'll double check now with Rebecca, and also a qualified chartered accountant, and various roles. But the best would be to go and view her LinkedIn profile. It's very impressive, and she also shares a number of posts and articles that I found insightful. So we, before I then start with the questions for our podcast, let me then give an opportunity for Rebecca to do our own introduction and then just share with our audience her origins. I think it's from Australia. You can hear it from the accent, and then that just makes the whole podcast so much more interesting. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks very much for the very warm welcome, and hi to all the listeners on the CFO Club and related forums. So thanks very much for having me. As you say, the accent kind of gives it away, although these days, after 17 years in South Africa, I think it's definitely softened from its harsh Australian roots. But I was born and bred in Australia. I actually went to Bond University and graduated there and worked for PwC, where I then later transferred through to South Africa. And I guess to some extent, the rest is history. I really enjoyed the challenge that operating in the South African and the African environment gives a finance professional. And yeah, I'm excited to chat about the topic we've got today.
The topic is quite interesting. Dimension data, I think, is a staple within the economic environment and the IT environment within South Africa. It's such a long-standing brand and well respected, and that company recently underwent a name change. Just before I start with our questions, maybe we should start with that name change and becoming part of the NTT group. Just give us a little bit of a background about your role within Dimension Data as Vice President, and then of late now in the NTT group.
100%. So I guess, being part of a global organization and with Japanese roots, you have this title that's perhaps not so familiar in the South African context of Vice President, but I guess it aligns with kind of CFO FD of the Dimension Data South Africa business. So my portfolio extends to the full extent of the South African operations of Dimension Data, particularly when it comes to their ICT business. I've been in the role for just over 4 months now, so relatively new. But as you rightly say, Nicholas, I mean, Dimension Data is a household name in the South African ICT market, and I guess arguably one of the global success stories of the South African business context, which I think is something that's celebrated certainly in this organization. So the move to the entity data branding has definitely been of significance to the SA business. I think just for a bit of context for your readers, I mean, Dimension Data as a brand is over 40 years old, founded here in Johannesburg. And 10 years ago, thereabouts, was acquired by the Entity Data Group out of Japan. And obviously over that time, there's been a lot of integration of processes, people, systems, even brands to some extent. And I guess this is just the logical next step in that evolution and bringing the Japanese and global brand to our shores here in South Africa and the Middle East.
Yeah, the IT world is such an exciting world. I'm sure that you're now part of with the developments that seems just to increase daily from NVIDIA enhancing their abilities and everybody rushing into the large language models and applications becoming more complex, user needs becoming more intricate, and competition just seeming to increase. What is the future from a Dimension Data entity side on the IT developments as I just described?
No, 100%. Well, listen, I mean, the benefit of having a large corporate capital base behind you is quite arguably the R&D spend. So just to quote numbers, which are quite eye-watering for me, South Africans, I mean, NTT as a group spends over $3.6 billion in IT, into R&D. And I mean, that's a nice chunk that we can invest in bringing some of these next-gen technologies, as you say, into the South African market. Likewise, I think what's really exciting, particularly as it relates to this rebranding and this globalization of the NTT brand, is actually then taking the South African expertise that we have to the rest of the world, and certainly establishing ourselves here as a bit of a hub for activity and excellence. And you know, maybe just to quote something recently I read, that something like over 50% of tech professionals are under the age of 35, and given where the South African context comes from in terms of unemployment rates and specifically youth unemployment, that's a really awesome opportunity for Dimension Data and NTT Data, as we're now known, to just capitalize on that market and grow those skills. Maybe just to punt a few, I mean, we've recently been awarded some amazing work out of Ireland, where we've taken circa 40 odd people out of our organization, many of which are graduates out of our graduate programs, to establish a center of excellence for Amazon Connect. You know, Amazon's being obviously one of the larger organizations in the tech space, and that's a really exciting development. And we've certainly got plenty more like that, where NTT Data is investing their money to grow the local business. And I think that's a really exciting play for not just for employees in this organization, but I think the broader economy.
I recently attended my daughter's graduation. She just completed a computer science degree, and there was about, I think, 350 graduates that completed at the University of Pretoria. And given that the way the technology is developing, maybe that's still a very small, not a big enough number for the demand that's needed within the sector. Maybe explore some more with us and share the need for IT professionals. Is there a shortage? Does the universities produce the right type, or is it being replaced by new technologies?
Look, I think, maybe I'll take a bit of a segue off that. I think, you know, Nicholas, since I graduated, which admittedly was some time ago, I've always been told as a finance professional I'm going to be replaced by a computer. And 20 odd years later, telling my age now, I'm still around and I've still certainly got a job. And I think there's always going to be a role for ambitious, for skilled, for those of us who have EQ. There's always going to be a role for people in organizations, because at the end of the day, particularly in an organization like NTT Data, and particularly in the tech space, someone has to code, someone has to put the inputs into large language models, into Gen AI. That these things, computers don't just, pop out of the woodwork and know what to do. There's always going to be a need for humans who are willing to innovate and work with the technologies that we have in order to better society. And I think that's, whether it's in the tech industry, whether it's in the medical field, whether it's in the finance field, there's always a role for people and for humans. And but what makes it exciting is that I think our roles are evolving. So we're getting away from your standard, processing and manually intensive, time-intensive activities, and really starting to focus on using the human brain for what it is great at doing, for that innovative thought, for that bringing together of ideas, for that collaboration across countries. There's so much potential that's untapped because we're just spending so much time on transactional type work. And I think that people who are excited about getting into the tech industry should absolutely pursue that. And certainly in NTT Data, and I think in a lot of the organizations on the South African continent, there is so much opportunity in terms of graduate programs and Yes for Youth, that we're really excited to bring in the young skills into this area and grow and develop them, so that we can certainly take not only our organizations and our clients, but certainly the economy as a whole, to a place we just haven't been before.
I totally agree with you. That's my impression as well. It's just, as we get more tools, which AI is one form, we as humans develop and find new uses for them that we can't actually foresee now.
Exactly.
Coming back to your role now with NTT, how does the rebranding reflect NTT Data's dedication to investing in local talent and driving sustainable growth across Middle East and Africa?
Sure. So, I mentioned that I guess NTT has got a long history on the African continent, and certainly Middle East as well, through the acquisition of Dimension Data some 10 years ago. So I think that investment has been clear for quite some time. And listen, the Japanese culture is such that nothing is ever done in haste. It's always very well thought out, and they're all about sustainable decisions. I think you can just look to the likes of a Toyota in terms of where they invest and how they operate their business. That's just ingrained in that culture. So I think, moving to I guess rebrand the Dimension Data brand to NTT Data is just testament to the fact that our Japanese parents really do trust in the skill base that we have here in South Africa, and certainly in the growth in the ICT space on the continent, as well as into the Middle East. So I'll speak to the region involving the Middle East and the Africa. So I think there's an evidence of trust in local leadership and local growth. And as I mentioned, the investment spend that the group is putting into the African continent is quite impressive, not just on the back of things like Joburg 1, which is our flagship data center and the first of the group's data centers on the continent, which launched last year, back in 2022, which is obviously a massive investment in infrastructure to facilitate these technology advancements that you speak to. But then also in our local people, so investing in the various platforms and teams and skill sets that we've developed locally in order to take them to the world. We've done some really exciting work. I mentioned the Amazon Connect space. We've also done some really awesome work in building IoT platforms, so connecting smart devices. And I think this is a really interesting space for finance professionals to start connecting with their CIO counterparts around how we start making data-driven financial decisions. Because if we're sitting back in the offices or even from the comfort of our homes, as many finance professionals have the ability to do, our connection to the edge, which is where business is happening, is made bigger and bigger. So our ability to build these IoT platforms and try and connect the decision makers to the front face of their business is really cutting edge tech. And the fact that NTT has seen that in our local business and our ability to build these platforms, use analytics and AI in order to build models on the back of the data that these devices at the edge generate is actually really exciting stuff.
It does sound exciting. My follow-up question, with the shift to global delivery centers and centers of excellence, how has the role of the finance and operational teams evolved within entity data?
So whilst I might not have been replaced by a computer just yet, and thankful for that, I think my role has definitely changed and evolved over my career in ways that I don't think, to your point earlier, I could have ever imagined. And I think with our move to our global delivery centers and centers of excellence, particularly from a finance perspective, we've seen the outsourcing of the more traditional finance tasks and the routine transactional processing has really freed up the finance organization within Entity Data South Africa and Middle East to focus on the key decisions that are really going to move the needle. So we're not less focused per se on the financial disciplines that are obviously key in the financial role. But it's like you've probably always heard the analogy of it's difficult to mark your own homework. Well, with us outsourcing these tasks and outsourcing certain back office functions from a finance perspective, we're now not marking our own homework. We're now able to look at our processes, our systems, and even the people that we engage with just a different lens, which enables us to really start thinking more strategically. How do we optimize processes? How do we ensure we have the right disciplines in place in order to support the organization? And I think that's expanded not just from the finance organization, but also the operational side of the business. So take something as simple as getting quotes to a customer. We no longer have salespeople coming back to a home office to write up quoting and these kind of things. We've developed systems and processes with our outsourced organization in order to have a seamless flow between a sales opportunity to quoting, to really shorten that sales cycle and certainly get our operational people focused on what they do best. And I think, just bringing those innovations into our business has definitely elevated the teams and the thinking that goes on into those teams. And I think also enabled us to think a little bit differently, which is critical to moving forward in this fast-paced world.
Yeah, and I think it's driven by this relentless pursuit of efficiency within business. It's getting profits, doing return on assets, return on investments, service delivery, and as we start servicing our clients better and our customers better, they ever demand more. So you have to do more with less. And then obviously governments want more taxes, and you then even have to squeeze more efficiencies out of the system. I think that's is one of the driving forces behind IT. That's just efficiencies. The next question then moves on within this relentless pursuit of operational efficiencies is how do we manage our people? On your, I just read a little bit more about you on your LinkedIn profile, Rebecca Powell, and some of the other articles. I think you started off in music, wanted to become a professional musician, ended up in accounting, studied at Bond University, then did your articles, and then from there moved into this finance role and eventually CFO/vice president. I just want to explore that a little bit more. How do you, how important is it in your role as a CFO and how did you develop your skill sets? Because when you finish your articles at PwC, they were well rounded, but they obviously weren't what your current capabilities are. And within that period of completing articles to where you're now at, can you just give us a little bit of a glimpse about your own skill development and for aspiring CFOs? How do you move from your articles into a CFO position?
Sure. So Nicholas, I wish it was a perfect science and I could give you the building blocks of ABC, but I do actually believe that it's an art. In fact, it's a blank canvas that you literally need to paint. So you need to grab that bull by the horns, and the best advice I think I can give to any aspiring future CFO, FD, in any context for that matter, is just to harness every opportunity that comes your way. You've really got to put yourself out there and be open to everything and anything. And I think remembering that any opportunity is a learning opportunity. I think I've spoken before about the fact that my leadership style is very much a combination of all the leadership styles that I have experienced in my career, and that's not just the good ones; it's also the bad ones, because they're the mental notes I make of not doing as I kind of move forward in my career. So I think harness every opportunity that you're given, and just really put yourself out there. And it might seem like an opportunity is coming from left field. Absolutely go for it. We tend to be quite risk averse as finance professionals. So I'm not saying don't do your pros and cons list, but certainly take every opportunity that comes your way. And coupled with that, I think link yourself up with a network. I think the mentoring opportunities of not only just my more senior colleagues and those with a few more years under their belt than myself, but also having that village around you of like-minded individuals who constantly push you to do better, to be better, to think differently. I think that network of individuals and the things like the CFO Club are fantastic avenues in order to meet other like-minded individuals who can help you to certainly push your personal boundaries in your career and move forward.
That is so important. I think it's like micro learnings. You learn by example, and like you said, there's also the bad examples, good examples, and all of them mold eventually the person that you want to become. The reason I've asked this question is that it's something that we've been thinking a long time about at CFO Club, especially with our CFO certification work group. And recently, the European Union, one of our sister bodies, made a proposal to the EU. They've got a standard setting committee, CEN, and they then, together with treasurers as well as credit managers and CFOs, decided to develop a map, a competency framework / map of CFO skills. And that would be quite an interesting development, especially in a globalized world. How do we assist CFOs in moving globally and working in different companies? Maybe a skill sets is necessary, and maybe also then guidance on where on your journey do you obtain these. Is it with an MBA? Is it with articles? Is it with extra classes and the like? What is your view, if I may ask, I didn't prepare you for the answer, about the possibility of whether to develop a competency framework for CFOs and being able to provide them a map in that 10-year growth period between finishing your CTA, CA articles and moving into the CFO position?
So I'm probably going to be quite controversial, but I truly don't believe that the skill sets of a CFO can be reduced to a to-do list. And I say that because I think the role of CFOs is so diverse, depending on where you want to end up. And that's going to be a very individual decision for each CFO. Sure, there are likely a base set of skills from a technical perspective, at the very least, if not also from a professional perspective. But I've probably got a broader sense in what I deem to be, I guess, the skills I need to be successful as a CFO, which certainly differ, I think, from other individuals who are in a similar role. And that's I guess, informed by personal preference in terms of how I enjoy learning, as well as the organizations I've chosen to work with. And maybe just to give another example, the ideals of a listed high-flying CFO will be very different from a smaller organization that is in a very different space in terms of their corporate journey. So I really do think that the skill set of a CFO is quite broad and certainly dependent on the role that the CFO wants to pursue.
I think I tend to agree with you.
There's nothing like experience on the ground. I must be
No,
honest.
nothing.
Again, it's a personal preference, but my preference for classroom versus a few hard knocks in the journey of life, I'll choose the hard knocks and the path less traveled every time.
I agree with you. I totally agree. So speaking about hard knocks and managing people, how does entity data promote diversity and inclusion within its workforce, particularly in a traditionally male-dominated sector?
Yeah, well, it's not an easy task, and you're right in saying the ICT sector, and I'm going to talk specifically, I guess, to South Africa because that's my frame of reference is certainly male dominated, and I think it's a real feather in Entity's cap that the South African executive of Entity's business here is made up of 50% of women, which I think clearly demonstrates our commitment to diversity, is what you said, is in a male-dominated sector. And not only is our ExCo diverse in gender, but certainly in age, race, experience. And I don't think we can discount, the theory that's been written about the need for all of these factors to be considered when getting to the best decision making. That diversity of thought comes from diversity of backgrounds, and certainly where I'm excited to see that playing out in the entity space. And actually, recently we had a Japanese executive come across into our to see and to meet our people, and he was particularly complimentary of the business we've built here and the diversity that he sees. It's not necessarily something that he has seen in other parts of the organization. I think that's definitely a feather in our cap to be something that we're very proud of. And I guess outside of the leadership and the executive roles, I think our women are recognised far and wide in the IT sector, and it's really empowering to watch. I think I mentioned some of the initiatives that we have in the organisation, from our Saturday schools to graduate programs and Yes for Youth, and our hiring practices in all of those initiatives marry those that we employ in the organisation. And there's definitely a committed focus towards ensuring that we do build up the gender diversity across the organization through from the ground up. And then I think, aside from policies and practices and all of the more formal things that we have in place, it's the small things that we have in the organization. And last week I was actually privileged enough to attend a Mother's Day function that we had in the campus, where we packed care packages for mothers in the public health facilities on the back of an NGO that we were supporting, A Kind Start. And I was really blown away, not only by the female attendance, but also by the support of our male colleagues in this initiative. And I think we're really building a caring organisation that values the role of women, not just in the workplace, but certainly in all elements of society. And I think that NTT is really excited to be carrying on that legacy with their brand here in South Africa, particularly because of the focus that we have, not just as an organisation, but as a country, on diversity. And I think it's certainly another one of those factors where we're going to be taking Africa's mindset to the world and hopefully influencing the decisions that are made throughout the entity data organisation.
Yeah, the graduation ceremony that I just attended was with my daughter, just qualified with her in computer science, and
Congratulations.
I think about half of the students were female. It was quite evident, and also very diverse colored as well, of all types of persons. So I think with that starting block and that feeding into the bigger sector, I think it's just a process of time where we will have the access for everybody on an equal way, which I think is a good thing. Our customers are also of all genders, and you surely have to develop a software platform and tools that speaks to your customer base. And the diversity of thought is so important. And with that, also the ability to communicate the different thought patterns and implement that. So it's a very exciting period, I'm sure. I think my last question: in what ways does your focus on capital allocation, discipline, and returns shed a different light on how to view the business during this transition?
Yeah, thanks for that one. So I guess a bit of my background is probably important here. So I've spent the majority of my career, I guess, serving listed corporate environments, and I guess the last decade in particular, I haven't been too far from the shareholder, and this proximity to those who really have a vested interest in the long-term returns and thus the capital allocations today to yield future value has certainly given me a perspective that those who are perhaps driven by short-term bonuses may not necessarily see. And I think that's been the most exciting thing coming into the organization is starting to build that visibility into the short-term measures that we need to take in order to generate longer-term returns across the organization. So rather than just focusing on revenue and costs for the current year, my emphasis, I guess, is largely on the longer term, and that involves shifting, I guess, the finance organization, the organization as a whole, to an understanding of more than just the income statement, which often we see, flashed up in presentations, internal presentations and the like, but also just starting to understand the full financial cycle from an income statement, balance sheet, cash flow perspective, and understanding how all of these elements are interrelated and how they come together in terms of making decisions around capital allocations. And not all these decisions are always easy. It might involve divesting or reducing the investment we make in certain business lines to reinvest in other areas of higher growth potential. Like you mentioned, Nicholas, the IT space is incredibly fast-paced, and we absolutely need to make sure that we're at the forefront of that for our customers, because they expect us to be there, and also for our employees who want those growth experiences in different technologies and working with different teams across the globe. So again, that's taking a bit of short-term pain potentially for some longer-term gains, and then building all of that into your financial models and your budgets are all quite complex tasks that obviously the CFO needs to execute on. So I think that rigorous evaluation of projects and initiatives with not just a short-term focus, but also then a focus on the longer term, and then how we manage those projects throughout their life cycle to ensure that we reach those objectives that we set out to achieve is definitely a skill set that I have honed over a number of years, particularly servicing the listed environments.
That sounds impressive. Looking ahead, what are your expectations for the future of entity data, and how do you envision building a new legacy on a global scale?
So maybe just to answer that question, we've recently participated in a survey that My Broadband did, and Dimension Data, as it was known, was graded as the top ICT brand in South Africa and most trusted by a significant margin. I think we came out at 42% of respondents voting in favor of the Dimension Data name, and certainly placing their trust in us, with our nearest competitors coming mid-teens or less. So the Dimension Data brand has certainly been built up over the years and is certainly trusted. So I think our initial expectation is that we see in the coming years the entity data brand is obviously put forward as one of the most trusted, if not the most trusted ICT brand on the continent, and certainly throughout the Middle East. So that's certainly what we're working towards. But then in terms of, I guess, in the tech space, we're certainly going to continue focusing on the services industries and the products that we sell into that space. I think we're excited about the global platforms that are coming through as part of entity data and the continuous innovation that entity data is doing in that space. So I think we're committed to growing our managed services and managed campus businesses. And with these new funding models in this arena, are certainly also keeping the finance teams on their toes as we start to look to as a service business models. I think we're certainly seeing cloud as something that's continuing to grow. And then, as you've rightly said, the buzzwords of the day being AI, generative AI, are critical growth levers for us. And certainly our data analytics and our teams are incredible. And I'm very excited to see the solutions they'll be taking into not only the local market, but certainly into the broader customer base of entity data. I think internally to entity data from a South African perspective, our biggest shift is probably to be looking at a more vertical approach. So traditionally, we have been quite horizontal in the way that we operate. And we've been taking our solutions to a variety of industries. We're now looking to invest in specific verticals. And within the South African market, we certainly see the FSI space, retail, and manufacturing being the specific growth sectors that we're looking to invest specifically in. And certainly building on the experience we have in those specific sectors now with some of the larger corporates on the continent, we're certainly going to be going big in those plays and trying to bring the digital journeys that we're seeing of international customers to the local market, and thus obviously growing the local presence, which is really exciting. And then, as I mentioned, I think finally with this move to entity data, it's an amazing opportunity for our people. So I'm really excited to hopefully come back to you in a little while and tell you about some of the exciting opportunities our people have had to take their skill sets from the South African Joburg-based campus into the rest of the world and see where we can take our people. I think that's one of the most exciting things about this rebranding.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for a very insightful interview and podcast and being so open and with sharing your information and your views on different things. We'll definitely invite you back in a couple of months or maybe next year, early next year, on the developments from the South African campus, as you said, and taking Dimension Data to new heights as part of the entity group. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for joining CFO Club today.
It's a pleasure, Nicholas. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
You have done the work. You have earned the title.
Interesting. Thank you,
now
Rebecca.
Get the designation. Cyber's most sought after CFO SA designation gives you the credibility and objective recognition of the 34 competencies that you have mastered on your route to becoming a CFO. Cyber's most sought after CFO designation gave me the credibility and objective recognition of the 34 competencies that I have mastered on my route, grounded in an internationally recognized competency framework requiring knowledge and experience in strategy, operations, and finance. Being part of the CFO Club Africa opens you up to a network of CFOs. The CFO SA designation is relevant to you if you have experience in performing various finance executive functions within the finance department. Being part of this elite group of modern CFOs helps you grow alongside your peers in a valuable source of advice on leadership challenges. If you are looking to demonstrate your leadership abilities to the future employers, then this designation is for you. Apply now. It's time to step it up. Become a finance leader and get recognized as a CFO. This is your side.